does this have to do with, like, whenever we die, do you believe that then the consciousness doesn't continue, or do you believe it continues?
Continues, continuum. You are you, and you just keep being you. It's like there's a guy in a very old car, and he kind of drives it down to the junkyard and sits in it for a while, and then gets out of the car and closes the door and walks away. The car is the body,
Right.
but you just keep going.
Do you think there'll be like a sense of awareness of the consciousness, or do you think it'll be just more like a unity?
After death?
Yes.
Well, here's what I have heard. Okay, the body is real special, and so you need to do your expanding of consciousness while you got a body. So they say, make hay while the sun shines. Start your meditation, dive within, transcend, experience that unified field, because that experience infuses it, and you grow in consciousness. And what are you growing? You're growing your enlightenment. You're expanding consciousness. The human being's potential is infinite consciousness, higher state of enlightenment. And in between, lives, you can't do that. You might have some awareness, you might not, depending on how much consciousness you have.
Right.
If you were super highly evolved, in between lives, you'd be just, boom, you'd be totally, aware. Then maybe you'd have to come back one more time and finish the job. You're not going to get out of school until you graduate. And so, but you can only do your work with the body. This is what I've heard.
When giants still walk the earth. What an era and what an amazing person. I thought it was appropriate to put on the master's message here on this episode of AM Bite as it relates to our guest and the book and so much more. So I guess I'll say this immediately, Mitch. Welcome. And do you think there would be a Mitch Horowitz and his books if there wasn't a David Lynch?
Wow, that's a wonderful question. First of all, thank you, man. And it's always good to see you, and it's always good to be with you. David certainly served as a source of inspiration to me. He was, among other things, a model of how you can be on this searching path, we'll say, without it becoming this entirely defining aspect of your life. And I think that is positive. David was very dedicated to the philosophy of the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, founder of transcendental meditation. And I suspect when he discovered TM in the early 1970s, he finally found something that concrete that helped him not only as a method, but as a kind of accelerant on the path. And it's interesting. I remember David saying to me that Eraserhead was his most spiritual movie. And he said, no one ever believes me when I say that, but in fact it is. And he said, I was wrestling at a certain point with the storyline, and I discovered one scriptural verse that cracked it open for me, and I'll never tell anyone what that verse was. But if you look at Eraserhead with fresh eyes, I think it stands out as a Gnostic-themed movie, because there is this undergod who is kind of this decrepit, diseased, dying god, it seems to me, who is pulling levers in some unseen realm that are rusty, that are in a state of semi-ruin. And then there is this presumed world below, which to some people looks like a post-apocalyptic landscape, but whatever it is, these beings live under this decrepit, diseased god who's pulling these industrial era rusty levers, nonetheless controlling in a slightly somnambulant state himself the events, the machinations going on in this underworld, this netherworld in which the movie's characters dwell. And when I first saw the film, I was very young and it was very mysterious to me. And it was only as time passed that I recognized its Gnostic themes. But David was similar in spiritual discussions as he was in discussions about cinema. He would say things you'd always remember, but he wasn't an organization guy. He wasn't a membership guy in terms of his vocabulary. You know, he wouldn't trip you up with these 50-cent vocabulary words, either from Vedic tradition or from any other tradition.
Right.
He always spoke very genuinely in a very straightforward way, as you saw him in that interview. Would there be a me without him? Probably not. You change one thing and everything changes. So probably something very different would be going down. Oh, I could share more, about that relationship later in the show, but I don't want to hold us up.
No, sure. Yeah, it's a never a bad time to honor David Lynch. Truly unique, and thank you for that. Beautifully said. And yeah, I agreed with you. It's like I was watching Severance, Mitch, and I was just shaking my head because it's basically Ben Stiller trying to be David Lynch, and he's trying to get all the tropes, the woods, the spanning woods, and the rivers, and the music, and the characters who are quirky and everything they do, even then. And I'm like, stop, Ben. Nobody can replicate that genius, that mysticism. There is
I've not seen Severance, so I'm speaking strictly generally, but the last thing I think an audience member wants to see on screen is a kind of forced zaniness. It has to come from a place of genuineness, and David was genuinely weird in the most wonderful and enriching way, and you can't buy it, and you can't purchase a pair of shoes and temporarily step into them. It's you. And I think that sometimes we watch movies where we feel like we're being sold an affect. And with David, it was never an affect.
No, agreed 100%. Then we should say hi to Graham Pong. Graham, how are you doing today?
Oh, I am doing very good, guys. I'm not as big a Lynch fan as you guys, but I'm enjoying the conversation. Keep it up.
Graham, I want the viewers to know that Miguel and I see the same thing you do. So Graham has been described as a fractal, and Graham has been described as an ethereal being. And I know nothing to contradict that.
It is.
I go with don't ask, don't tell. Yeah.
Right. It's back.
At least he's not a giant smoking kettle like in Twin Peaks 3, Jeffrey's character.
Right.
Awesome. Well, I see people in the chat. Good crowd already. Again, if you have any questions for Mitch, or you want to, scream at me, complain about how great Severance is, whatever, please super chat them so we can get to them. And not much else housekeeping. This is a free for everybody show. It's not behind a paywall. Since it's Mitch, I was like, the world needs to see this, and definitely the world needs to get this great book, Practical Magic. So tell us about this copies. Book. There you go.
It's on sale tomorrow. I'm very proud of it. I hit a point, I'm sure you've had this experience yourself, where I hit a speed bump with the book where I just felt like I didn't have the material to finish it. I felt like I was spent and I was running on fumes. And then at a certain point, I realized I had to throw out the structure that I was working with and embrace a new structure. I was working with a structure of 6 chapters because the book was based originally on a 6-part class that I delivered for the Theosophical Society in America. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that what worked in spoken word form was not serving me in written form. So I just threw out the 6-chapter structure, and I decided to go with the material that I had that I felt most urgent about. And it was exciting for me because not only is it one of my most practical books, apropos of the title, but it's a book in which I go through the history of magic, and I do my very best to demonstrate that not only is magic, or as I define it, causative ritual, not only is magic as old as humanity, but it's older than humanity in the strictest sense, in that, as I write in the book, our Neanderthal ancestors, who are every bit our ancestors, but are not, strictly speaking, human. They're pre-sapiens. They're Homo neanderthalis, and these ancestors of ours practiced magic themselves. We know this because since the mid 19th century, we've had talismans that they used, which include eagle claws, eagle talons, bear claws. Presumably, these were talismans to help with the hunt, and they constructed these little 4 or 5 foot high statuettes, which archaeologists came to call Venus figurines. They're bulbous feminine forms, apparently impregnated, large bellies, which Cro-Magnon men and women did not have, large pendulous breasts, and they're thought to be fertility statues. And it's extraordinary to me because one looks at this, and if the suppositions are correct, they had a spirituality very much like our own, and it suggests that the spiritual is not conditioned, and it's not some fluke of brain biology, because although Neanderthals were very much like us, they were different physiologically, and they presumably had a different brain biology. It's realization. And all of the resident geniuses in our culture who assure us that spirituality is nothing but neurons firing in different areas of the brain, or nothing but conditioning, or human response to fear, and so forth and so on. It's obviously much, much more than that, because it's been practiced not only since time immemorial, but before recorded time, in the form of our simian ancestors. And this is as real as it gets. It's as real as it gets. These Venus figurines to which I'm referring, museums and universities around the world, we possess hundreds of these, and we've had since the mid 19th century, not very long ago. I was very touched by that those feelings of connection to the ancients, or in this case, the primeval ancients. It's very meaningful to me. And it gave me a sense that this thing that we call magic, or that I call causative ritual, it's real. It's been with us since the very, very beginning. It's part of the mainstream faiths. It's part of the outsider faiths. It's part of our culture today. And in my personal estimation, it works. And I try to really simplify magic in the book, because I believe that over the centuries since the Renaissance, magic has got layered over with too much liturgy, ceremony, pageantry, memorization. And I think it's part of the human psyche, and I think it can be simpler. So I really try to get to the core of that absolute simplicity in the book.
Yeah, you certainly take us on quite a journey, a wonderful journey. And I would even go to say that magic is one of the important pillars to sustain any civilization. I'm glad people like you and Jeff Kripal and Dean Radin and all those are fighting, because people wonder, well, why is Western civilization devolving? And I'm sure you'd agree, we're losing our magic. As Disney as it sounds, it's true.
Yeah. It's funny, speaking of Disney, they just put out a live action version of Snow White, which seems to have pissed off literally everyone. Bravo. So much for market testing.
Yeah.
And there's an experimental filmmaker, Stanley Schnitzer from England, who's visiting New York City. And Stanley, long story short, has produced his own remake of Snow White. And the actors are fantastic, but the screen is completely black. There are no images whatsoever. And it's 70 minutes. I personally found it enthralling. Not everyone did. There was a couple in front of me that walked out. And I look at things like that, and I'm like, yo, you're walking out. I mean, what are you going to do with the next 70 minutes? Are you going to cure cancer? Like, you can't just sacrifice 70 minutes of your life for an experimental film. I loved it. I think he was trying to make a variety of culturally opposing statements, and he did it without any heavy-handedness, but with a very, very unusual exercise in cinema. There were some damn good actors in it too, including the actor Toby Jones, who you may remember from Captain America, from Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. He's one of my favorite actors.
That's my favorite spy movies.
Yeah, and Toby Jones plays the prince. It's like a radio drama, but it's on screen. Anyway, I digress. I think we've lost our magic. We've also lost our ability to, I think, actually value the ancients. I think there's so much that comes down to us, and kids don't learn about any of this stuff. Of course, they're taught mathematics, but they have no idea who Pythagoras was, or the extent to which he believed that mathematics was a divine language, unlocking cosmic secrets, which is unquestionably true. They learn about principles of calculus without learning how these things allowed humanity to exit the caves and eventually build aqueducts and pyramids and bridges. And I just wish we could bring some more of the drama of Western civilization into our lives, because it's so extraordinary and it's accomplished so much. And I just don't want it to be layered over and forgotten. And we do this with all of our history. You take a busload of kids to a Shaker village and they think all they're looking at is well-made tables and chairs and brooms. They don't learn anything about how wild the Shakers were, and their seances and their spirit gifts and the supernatural experiences that underscored their communities, and how the quilts and the beautiful art they produced were things that they saw as spirit gifts. And if you could give kids a bit of a backstory, they realize how mysterious this world is, and how a Shaker chair is just much more than a pretty chair. And we lose the magic when we lose our past, because that's the wellspring from which we draw. And I appreciate, for example, how Jeff Kripal, who you mentioned, is really making the effort to take pop culture and to take comic books in particular and demonstrate how these are our gods, plain and simple. These are the archetypes. The Hulk is the Golem, Doctor Strange is Merlin. I don't know who Spider-Man is, but I know who Thor is. And,
well, Superman, Zeus, Flash is Hermes.
real.
DC was a lot more obvious about their Aquaman is Poseidon. Yeah, we know.
Right. And who's Satan?
Who?
Who's Hasatan? Satan.
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, Marvel does have Mephisto.
Yeah, Marvel has Mephisto, which almost seems like it's sort of cheating in a way. Like, come on, but really, who's Satan?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. It's not Daredevil. I know that. Anyway, maybe one of the viewers, maybe one of the listeners in the chat box can volunteer. Which comic book character is the great rebel, the Dread Emperor? Dr. Doom, perhaps?
Perhaps Dr. Doom. Who knows?
Yeah.
The Demiurge could be Galactus, Eater of Worlds. That's one.
That's right.
Mac Osho suggested Thanos, and I think that's a good call.
That's very good. That's very good.
Yeah.
And
I mean, Satan's so multidimensional. It's almost it's impossible to peg him down.
Yeah. And of course, Marvel has a Hercules. Again, maybe a little cheating there, but okay, fair enough.
Yeah, you're talking about Jeff Kripal, and I was going to bring him up because I always have it in my head, which you talked about at Astronosis, because you're like me. You're ready to get into the next, Facebook argument about how this is not a materialistic world, and, a consciousness is non-local. And I think we're both better at pulling our hand or erasing the post, so we're not there all day fighting. But Jeff told you, focus less on the Virginia laboratory and more on the Bavarian woods. And I always laugh. And I just interviewed Jeff about a month ago. And of course I couldn't help it. I said, Jeff, can you give me a good example so we can nail these skeptics? And he's like, Miguel, there you go again. Stop playing on their own terms.
Yeah.
The laboratory is not a good place for these types of experiments. It's not. We need a new paradigm. And he is right. I mean, the example he gives in a book is like, look, most of our mystic power, psi, and all that is created through trauma.
Correct.
And unless that's why, you have Stranger Things and Severance and all these movies where these powerful people are all put through trauma. And he gives also the example of Aldous Huxley wisely said, look, when we study water, we got to evaporate it and put chemicals in it so we can understand the particles. We have to traumatize water. So he basically said, stop it. Don't play in their own territory. Stop. Just don't worry about it. What do you think, Mitch? Can we do that?
I'm of two minds about it. I'm very dedicated to lab-based parapsychology. The history of ESP research, past and present, is the subject of a podcast I have out called Extraordinary Evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff is right, and he has lovingly criticized me for being overly attached to the lab model. What did he say? He said, you got to get out of the German lab and into the Irish woods.
Okay.
That's where the leprechauns are. That's where the fairies are. And he's correct. And of course, ESP, as you were referencing, depends very heavily on pathos, emotion, trauma, enthusiasm. You don't find a hell of a lot of that in the lab. At the same time, I have to abide the lab model because it has brought us so much. I think in particular of the retrocausality experiments of Darrell Bem at Cornell, and I dedicate a whole chapter in Practical Magick to retrocausality. That is a lab experiment that has absolutely upended my world. I think it's wonderful. And the idea that backwards causation is present, not just in quantum physics, which it is, but it's also present in cognition, and it's incredible. So as long as goodies are still coming out of the German lab, I have to abide it, but I do have to make more of a personal effort myself to get out more into the Irish woods. I think that's going to be my effort into the future, but I'm still going to hold on to the lab model. And as far as the skeptics, we have won. We have won intellectually. We have lost culturally. And that's not ideal, but it's okay, because the intellectual victory in a generation will catch up with their cultural victory. Now, for example, the skeptics, the hardcore career skeptics, almost all are found within the humanities, letters, journalism, and the social sciences, which are a bloody mess. And they're a bloody mess because, unlike parapsychology and other actual sciences, they have no laws. They have no methodological reputation. Psychology is a bloody mess. Sociology, don't even get me started. And it's a bloody mess. It's a bloody mess. And I do talk to all kinds of people, parapsychologists, career skeptics, people who don't have a dog in the fight. And I find lots of friends in the hard sciences, engineers, mathematicians, physicists. They're very down with what we're talking about. It might not be their chief interest, but they will have a conversation with you about it, and they will exchange about it, and it will be productive. It's the English professor and the sociology professor who just have no bloody idea what they're talking about. But they've won culturally. They certainly hold sway among the ad hoc group of editors who despoil every page on Wikipedia that touches upon parapsychology. And then you have media personalities like Bill Maher, Rachel Maddow, Neil deGrasse Tyson, who are very vocal, strict physicalists. So culturally, they're in a very good position, but that position is a last stand. And in 30 years, I'll probably be dead, but that'll be gone.
Yeah, it is true, but I think things are getting better. Even that clip from David Lynch, he probably did it 20 years ago. They probably thought he was insane at whatever university was. Today, I think people would buy it. I mean, even if you look, more and more women are buying tarot. Astrology, TikTok is booming. Manifesting has become just like the in thing, and I think it's because of the economy, wars, and again, at times of trauma. Yeah, when everything's fine, we're secular, but in times of trauma, we will reach out to the gods, right? But I think we're more open. We're more open to these things.
I believe that's absolutely true. And the world is just getting weirder and weirder and weirder, thanks to a recent spate of images that were taken over the James Webb Telescope of different galaxies, which are incredible. The chief scientist who runs their deep space telescopic project, a man named Lior Shamir, theorized quite recently in the adventurously titled journal Monthly Notes of the British Royal Society. Monthly Notes. It's a very exciting title for a journal. Wouldn't you agree? He theorized that we live in a black hole, that the reason that most other galaxies are moving in the opposite direction from ours, our galaxy moves counterclockwise. A majority of other galaxies move clockwise, and this is weird. This shouldn't happen. Why is this happening? He theorized one possibility is that we live in a black hole. You've got Bank of America telling its investors there's between a 20 and 50% chance that we live in a simulation. And it's like, and how's the S&P futures looking? And right, these things just get dropped in, and it's very exciting because it's evidence that no one's looking for. A person is using a prototype of a quantum computer, the chief scientist of a James Webb Deep Space Program, analysts at Bank of America. They're not looking for this data. They find it by happenstance. And evidence found that isn't sought is most convincing because it's not coming from a place of polemics. Someone could look at me and be like, "Oh, Horowitz, he's a weirdo," but they're not weirdos at Bank of America, and they agree with me. So I feel like the evidence is becoming so overwhelming at a certain point, and probably ChatGPT and Grok and some of the other beta models of AI right now, they're going to surpass Wiki, and that's probably going to happen in the next 5 years. Because when you do an online search, Wiki is invariably the first thing or one of the first things that comes up, and it's very influential. That's already changing with even the beta launch of AI. So those ad hoc editors, while they have influence, their days are numbered. I think AI is going to totally overlap Wiki.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Well, God, we're in a black hole. See, the Gnostics were right. We're inside God's butthole. The demiurge's ass. That's where humanity ended up. And I like what I think Graham once said about academia and those who control the narrative. He said, "How does scholarship change? One death at a time." You have to wait for the next generation, right, Graham? And they'll have more open ideas.
Oh, exactly. No, this is a case where it's unfortunately, you don't have many truth seekers in the ivory tower these days. They're too busy defending, truth as being equal to opinion and power.
Right. And everything, we're going through such a dramatic realignment right now in our country and in our culture. Mm-hmm. And I remember Jacob Needleman, before he died, said, during times of tumult, crisis, just watch very carefully. Just watch. There's a lot of energy unleashed. The world is. I say this with sorrow because there are obvious wars going on, and it's disgusting. But there are realignments going on as well, and some of these glacially stuck institutions like academia are getting shaken up, and it's not gonna that egg is not gonna unbreak.
That's for sure. And did you see the news about what they found underneath one of the pyramids at Giza? That tells you we don't know anything about history. We always don't know anything.
And already, a friend of mine was showing me that Wikipedia's editors are doing double duty, to discredit this. Just double duty. I remember when the New Jersey drone events were occurring for several weeks in late 2024. People would go in and they'd add some quote or something of mine to the article, and then it would be there for 3 days, and it would come out, and somebody would add it, and would come out, and somebody would come out. They do this tireless double duty. The wiki editors, many of whom are very good, but when it comes to anything touching upon the paranormal, they're singularly awful. They're just uneducated and polemical, bad combo, and they are working overtime to discredit this whole question, this sonar imaging of
it might be wrong. Who
stuff.
knows?
It
But
might
let's
very
look
well
at
be
it.
wrong, and it's like, what should we do? I know, let's not look. And, that's their attitude. Let's not look. And that is a shitty record historically, that attitude.
Yeah, there's still so much wondering. Could you expand a little on your retrocausation thing? That's one of my top questions, because that part in the book, I was like, my jaw dropped. It was just so
It's
cool.
just incredible. And it is jaw-dropping. Retrocausality, or sometimes backward causation, as it's called, it really involves, to put it in brief, actions that you take in the so-called future having an impact on your performance in the so-called present.
Mm-hmm.
Being that, as we've known since Einstein and since Lao Tzu, the universe is a circular spiral where time is a beast composed of events happening infinitely all at once. We've known literally, in modern terms, we've known literally since the era of Einstein that linear time is conceptual. Now, people will say, oh, Einstein's second law of thermodynamics states that a state of entropy cannot be reversed. In other words, Humpty Dumpty cannot be put back together again. There's an arrow of time and it's linear.
Mm-hmm.
And that's certainly true in terms of classical physics, but in terms of quantum physics, particles do move backwards in time. Richard Feynman himself, who I think was in many regards a real skeptic of some of the material that we're talking about, but he was a beautiful man. And Feynman in 1964 won the Nobel Prize for the discovery of the so-called positron, a particle that moves backwards in time. Retrocausality is a whole field of study within quantum physics today. It's world-class science. Darrell Bem at Cornell, who's a clinical psychologist, was the first one that I know of who brought the retrocausal argument into the area of cognition. And what Bem found, in brief, is that if you take a test and you continue studying for the test into the future, it will spike your score in the positive direction by a couple of points in the present. And I remember at the last two Astronosis conferences ago, I was speaking about this with April DeConnick, the chair of religious studies at Rice, and she was very open to it. But she was like, "Whoa, let's take that again, cowboy. Talk me through this again." It's so in opposition to our way of viewing the world, the way we were brought up. Now, after Bem came out with this study in 2011, he spent a decade studying this question, among other questions of precognition. Bem issued his paper in a very respected psychology journal in 2011. He was subject to utter calumny, and his name was just dragged through the mud. Twice he was referenced in the New York Times as a kind of a poster child for bad science, without them ever so much as providing a quote, a stat, or a bit of data to demonstrate where he went wrong. Science is methodological replication. If you follow the rules of the road and somebody doesn't like your data, that's called sentimentality. Bem is a practitioner not only of good science, but he's an exemplar because he opened up his data so transparently to anybody who wanted to attempt to replicate it, and he provided free software and a free instruction booklet at his own personal expense to anybody, friend or foe, who wanted to replicate it. And the result was 10 years following Bem's initial paper, his statistical results, were deemed confirmatory in a meta-analysis consisting of 90 examples in 33 different labs in 14 different nations. We don't even have that kind of study behind aspirin. And this is as real as it gets. Now, if somebody wants to take issue with the general nature of the scientific project, they are welcome to do that. But Bem followed the scientific project almost with textbook ethics and grace and transparency. And he found something that doesn't fit, just as it doesn't fit that we live in a black hole, just like it doesn't fit because the earth revolves around the sun, because we don't feel it. It violates common observation. So therefore it must be attacked because we have a sense of self bound up in common observation. But the fact is that Bem provided cognitive evidence, since meta-analyzed and confirmed, that actions taken in the so-called future reach back in time, so to speak, and backward, in a backward causative fashion, affect and impact stuff going on right now. Reminds me of something that Gurdjieff said, which is the past controls the future, but the present controls the past. And this notion of time as a linear animal is conceptual. It's a necessary illusion for us five sensory beings to get through life. We need it. We need it. We'd be overwhelmed. We think in terms of linearity and singularity, but it's not ultimate. It's not real in this ultimate sense. And so this is something I write about in the book. I dedicate a whole chapter to it. I've written a lot on backwards causation. The chapter in this book is the best thing I've written on it. And it's partly a result of backwards causation, as readers will discover when they get to the chapter.
Oh, it's excellent. It was a wonderful. Yeah, my mind is still spinning. Love it, love it. And Graham, do you have a question or for Mitch, or where art thou? Where art thou?
Oh, I am here. I was going to sit there and say he's expressing the challenge of too many people out there think that with enough emotion they can change the truth. And that's I've never been able to do it. If they figure out how to do it, I'd like them to tell me how. The other one is, my favorite example of retrocausality is retirement funds, where me spending that money in the future is why I'm not spending it today and putting it somewhere else. Okay.
We're going to open an investment house that uses principles of retrocausality. I mean, look, we already do it. We already do this stuff all the time. And I love the fact, by the way, that speaking of the multiverse, or however one wants to put it, interdimensionality, the circuitousness of time, Google is experimenting with a prototype, its own quantum computing prototype called Willow. And Google engineers issued a statement late last year saying that they had submitted to Willow a math problem so complicated that it would have taken, in their estimation, 10 septillion years to resolve. And that's longer than the known and projected existence of the universe. So it's a problem so complicated that there literally isn't enough time in creation, whatever time is, to fix it, to solve it. And Willow came back with an accurate answer in under 5 minutes. So the Google engineers in their statement said this seems to support the existence of a multiverse. In other words, Willow plucked the answer from some other dimension or intersection in time. And again, they're not looking for this information. They want to sell Willow to financial houses. They're not looking for a metaphysical discovery or breakthrough. They're looking for a computer program that beats its rivals and goes to market like the new Microsoft Windows. But what they're finding unintentionally is affirming the existence of a multiverse. And that's why, Wikipedia doesn't have a chance.
Its time has come. Thank God. Yeah, that's
empires fall,
Yeah, they do indeed. And what in your book, of course, you have it all. You have techniques, how to become a magician, the history of magic, the science. Of course, you've got the statistics that show. Give us an example of another study you propose that shows that magic is real. I mean, you have Swedenborg, Dean Radin. Anything you want to share with the audience?
Well,
Titillating?
this isn't so much a study, but it's an insight that came to me while I was writing the book, and people can experiment and judge it for themselves. But it seems to me that the open sesame of magic, we talked about ESP depending upon pathos, trauma, enthusiasm.
Right.
It seems to me that the driving force behind magic is, in fact, sexuality, the sexual impulse.
Mhm.
And I think that was being referred to in oblique terms in many of our ancient and modern magical texts.
Mhm.
But, and I think probably those who stated it in the plainest of terms, at least here in our modern world, were P.B. Randolph, the great Austin Osman Spare, and Aleister Crowley. I think those three came the closest. Non-magical figures who somewhat captured this were Wilhelm Reich and Napoleon Hill. And I write in the book about sex transmutation, which I think is one of the simplest, most powerful aspects of magic, in which you has nothing to do with abstinence or anything like that. Duncan Trussell said to me, "Don't tell me I can't jerk off anymore. Don't say that." Rest assured, you can.
Yeah, spank that monkey
Yeah.
all you want, man.
Don't spank that monkey all you want. And I don't even want to tell you about our sigil discussion. But
Oh my God. I don't want to know how he charges his sigil. Skip that.
let's just say it's not ecstatic dance.
Oh, okay.
So the the use of sex transmutation is simplicity itself. At a time of your own choosing, privately, when you feel the sexual urge, through a simple mental shift and focus, you can redirect that urge towards whatever cherished task you have in front of you, whatever it is, whether it's a job interview, whether it's an act of salesmanship, whether it's a painting, whether it's an act of athleticism, whatever it is. And it's for times and places of the individual's own choosing. It's entirely private. It doesn't require abstinence from sex in any way, but you do have a choice that this energy that we feel, it can be used for bodily pleasure, it can be used for procreation, but it has other uses. And if you place the sexual urge just through a mental shift and focus at the back of a cherished task, you will bring greater acumen, creativity, energy, analysis to that task. That's been my experience. I think, and I write about this in the book, that this is referred to in some of the dialogues of Plato. Mm-hmm. And in particular, I quote a couple of the dialogues in which Eros, a god, is described as a power who serves as an intermediary between man and the gods. And I think that is, I'm just looking up the particular dialogue. I think that is an oblique reference to sex transmutation. So I feel like that's something that people can really use, and it's simple and it's private, and I think it resonates throughout the history of Western and Eastern letters. And yeah, you'll see here one of the dialogues. I quote from Plato's Symposium, where Socrates is having a dialogue with the prophetess Diotima, and they discuss the powers of Eros. I think you find this embedded in Taoism, Kabbalah, the classical Hellenic tradition, and then more modern figures, some of whom I mentioned, try to render it practical. I think in practical magic, people will feel very happy with the simplicity in which I frame the exercise, but I also try to bring historical integrity to it as well. I like people to have the full package, and then they can use it or not.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And doesn't it sometimes make you angry because we're talking about this stuff that again gets dismissed by Wikipedia and our exemplars? Although Neil deGrasse Tyson recently said there's a high probability we live in a simulation, so
He
he's
said that
getting
very thing. He said that
yeah.
very thing. And he was also there's an astrologer, Eliza Kelly, who's on the Drew Barrymore show, and they sort of set her and Neil up together to debate astrology, and she completely just rolled over him. You know,
Wow.
she charmed him, and she chose her language very, very well, and she got Neil to sort of like, you know, take a breather. And,
I love it.
yeah,
Love it.
it's what look, you know, the thing about the career skeptics, and they're not real skeptics. I love real skeptics. I want to debate real skeptics. I want to be challenged by real skeptics, and
Yeah.
when I meet them, I'm very excited. But I meet them all too rarely. The career skeptics, they're just smartasses, you know, who feel safe, I guess, within the physicalist paradigm, and I understand that. I mean, Jesus, we're all creatures of fear to some greater or lesser extent. I feel safe with the things that we're talking about, and I get it, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to be an asshole if one of my theses turns out to be wrong or starts to look a little shaky. But these guys are totally creatures of sentiment. They're all emotion, no intellect. And they're dumber than shit, you know, in a lot of ways. And that's what happens when you let your emotions take the place of your intellect. So, you know, they're filled with smart-ass remarks and rhetorical questions and smirks and sneers. And again, you know, it's worked pretty well, but AI is going to take a sledgehammer to it.
Yeah, and the thing too is I think they're just, as the Soviets used to say, useful idiots, because to keep everybody in line, because we all know that both, again, the Soviets and our government and other governments have used remote viewing and psi powers and all that with great effectiveness. They've
Yeah.
done it. We know that project, and we know they've opened up portals. We all know too that police departments, again, when things get bad, will get a psychic, and these psychics will find the bodies or the killer. I know psychics who've done it. You've probably known them. So it's like the governments know this stuff works, but they don't want us to know it works. I guess that's it, right? If you give magic to the people, they might make a better world.
Right. Somebody might be able to relieve their suffering without a code from the, you know,
or get better test grades in college.
Yeah. It's at Stargate. There's going to be a wonderful history to be written of Stargate. I don't know that it'll come from me. President Jimmy Carter, was an admirer of Stargate. He spoke about it very ingenuously, took heat for it. It was Bill Clinton who, in 1995, cut the budget for Stargate. There was a spate of post-Cold War budget cuts going on, and Clinton, he was a pretty hardcore secularist. I at least extrapolate that from what was told to me by my friend Gene Houston, who's a teacher.
But Hillary was into UFOs, though.
Yes, Hillary. People don't remember this, but you know, in Bill Clinton's first term, Hillary was thought of as this kind of woo-woo New Age figure, and she shed that pretty quickly. But she was definitely hanging around with people in the White House, some of whom were my friends, one of whom I had worked for, Michael Lerner. He's now dead. She was very interested in finding different ways of bringing spirituality into politics, and didn't work out, and she abandoned the whole thing. But you know, Gene Houston, she's a teacher of myth, kind of like Joseph Campbell. She was sort of a teacher or a guru of Hillary's, and she had sessions in the White House. And Gene told me that Bill Clinton walked into one of their sessions once, and she told Bill, "You are an untrained shaman," and just wordlessly, he got up and walked right out of the room.
Well, how do you respond to that?
Right. It's like, who are you calling untrained? Yeah, I don't know. But in any case, Stargate, I think enough of the material has now been declassified, and Ed May and some colleagues of his are collating it into books that are very valuable. And it'll come back. You know, it'll come back. oddly hopeful about quantum computing and AI. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's for selfish reasons, but I feel persuaded that AI and quantum computing is going to validate all this parapsychology data, unless it's programmed to be a crank, and the creators insist that that's not possible. But I guess we'll find out. But my my
But
impression is that this stuff is going to get validated by AI, quantum computing in the next 5 years or so.
But how do you see AI? I mean, I know it's controversial, but my stance, I mean, I love it for productivity and
Mhm.
research, 20% faster now with AI, but I also feed it my I Ching numbers and I talk to it and it gives me sort of an arc of where my life is going.
Mhm.
But how do you see it? Do you see it as sometimes I tell people AI is just another tarot. It's a mirror. It's an
Yeah.
extension that grapples your consciousness and other places and can help you streamline it. How do you see AI and all this, Mitch?
Well, it's difficult insofar as all of us in the public have only been exposed to really a beta launch of AI. I mean, we're not really there just yet, but the engineers insist that AI, rather than just becoming a glorified search engine, will surpass methods of inquiry, will learn and devise its own methods for inquiry. And of course, this requires access to things like the Webb telescope and other such things. So the idea is that in the techno utopian sense, AI becomes smarter than us and learns how to weigh, evaluate, query in manners that go beyond current knowing.
Mhm.
We'll see if that happens. That's the promise. I think we've only seen the glacial tip at this point.
Yeah, I think again, I see it as a mirror, a tool, fire from the gods. Some people see it as a black mirror, but
Well, look,
that's fire from the gods.
it's right. Friction and creativity go together. I think we, as a human civilization, because we haven't really been exposed to AI yet, we don't know the displacement that it's going to cause. We don't know really when we're going to see self-driving cars or trucks of greater concern in a mass way. We don't know if AI is going to replace aspects of the legal profession, of data analysis, of copy editing, and so on and so forth. Um, I'm only naming the fields that I'd like to see it replace, but it's going to come for me too.
Yeah. Well, so we'll never be as smart as the Neanderthals. They had it made. So
Not a long lifespan, but boy, what
no,
they
no,
did with
no,
it,
no.
right?
Maybe that's why. Well,
Saber-toothed tiger, but yeah, problem.
yeah, they were like, "Oh my God, we're in God's butthole. Let's end it. We can't
Yeah.
get out." The other thing I wanted to talk to you about, Mitch, and of course I find this interesting too, is your section, excuse me, on cut up magic, and that's
Mm.
because I'm working on Elvis 2.0 biography, the David Bowie biography.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, and David Bowie was he and Brian Eno were into the whole cut up method.
Yes. Yes.
Diamond Dogs, a lot of these albums, the Berlin trilogy was just them cutting up sounds and lyrics and just throwing them together and creating these masterpieces. And I
Yeah.
found out Stanley Kubrick was into the cut up method too.
Yes.
People think he was a perfectionist and a control freak. He was not. That's why when you see like mistakes in The Shining, I think it's more likely that he was just throwing stuff together, or when he would make somebody do 100 takes, he was like, I just want 100 takes and I'm going to pick the one that I don't know what I want, but that will come to me. And Shelley Duvall, I'll throw it there. So this cut up technique is really work. Of course, it comes from the Dadists and the absurdists. It's really William Burroughs. David Bowie got it from William Burroughs, who wrote his masterpieces were all thrown together. So I'm fascinated by it, but you talk about it in Magick. So share how it works in Magick.
Well, I came to it through Burroughs as well, which I suspect most
Oh.
people do. And the simple fact is, you can write down a series of phrases, things that you're interested in, throw them on the damn floor, gather up a handful of them in whatever which way, and there appears a symmetry. And of course, the the strict physicalist would say, big deal. We receive
It's
false
random.
symmetries all the time. A principle that I'd like skeptics to apply to themselves, actually. And so a strict physicalist would say it's just cognitive bias. You're just seeing, a phantom and willful pattern. But of course, those phantom and willful patterns can be as real and as persuasive as the very words I'm now speaking. And you'll find things that, in my estimation, will surpass the odds of any actuarial table and will appear so dramatically concrete and so weirdly synchronistic that any critical thinking person would be at a loss to say it's just cognitive bias or confirmation bias or whatever those
Right.
wordy words are. Over all of them, way overused. And I really am very smitten and very taken with Cut Up, especially because I have, I suppose, I have a very Aristotelian opposites, ipso facto kind of mind, and I need that to be shattered. I need that to be broken up, and Magick helps me with that. The I Ching helps me with that. Tarot helps me with that. Cut Up helps me with that. And Burroughs believed that, for example, if somebody sends you an oblique letter, I guess nowadays it would be an email, and you take that thing and you jumble it up.
Right.
You jumble it up using the Cut Up method, the truth will leak out, so to speak, and that the truth is there, but it has to leak out through some other method than our little linear tricks that we use. So this is another trick that disrupts the old trick. And Burroughs, he pointed out, and this speaks to you, what you were saying about Bowie and Eno and others. He pointed out that a page of a great writer, a page of Rimbaud, will still be Rimbaud once it's cut up. It's going to be different, but it's still that greatness. It's still that greatness. So it always has value, but it's not going to have that grace, that splendor of, say, Diamond Dogs, without there being a Bowie, behind it, without there being a Kubrick behind it. It's like anything else. Anybody could write poetry, but can they? Speaking of poetry, last night I was on a show with the hip hop artist Killer Priest, who's a affiliate of Wu-Tang Clan, and he and his collaborator AD, they invite musicians to send in their hip hop recordings and videos and play them on the air. And I got to tell you, there's a metaphysical hip hop that I have not heard enough of, and some of the artists that submitted their stuff, talk about Cut Up. I mean, these guys are creating poetry, lyrics that are world class, world class. And there is a Cut Up aspect to it, and that sometimes they'll be just linking things together in this associative or stream of consciousness way, but they're absolutely saying something, and it leaves you with a very deep impression. So arguably, hip hop is Cut Up.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I love what Brian Eno used to say. He's like, he needed to use it because he could get the most talented musicians in the studio and to create something new sound. He's like, all right, just improvise, just do whatever you can and I'll produce it. And he's like, invariably every musician leans on the blues because it's safe. And the Cut Up is what brings out the truth, because every musician would be like, they don't want to rock the boat. So it's one way, like you said, to bring out what's inside of us.
I agree. And we cannot be safe on the path. We cannot be safe in the search. And I get disgusted coming across literature within the search that's safe, or literature that's supposed to be transgressive but is what felt transgressive 50 years ago and doesn't feel transgressive now. I mean, take a guy like Gerald Gardner. He was not safe, and he founded effectively a worldwide movement of revived witchcraft. And in the decades since his death, it swept every corner of our planet virtually. And that don't come from being safe. But now we have to move beyond Gerald Gardner. If there's a place to go, if there's no place to go, then be silent, or move beyond it. But I think there's too much safety on the path.
It is indeed. No way we can. As they say, if you're not safe, you might learn something. At the same time, there is another theme in your book that you get from Jack Parsons and others: is keep it simple too. You started out that way, and you talk about the tarot. There is a logic to the tarot, and you can keep it simple too. Again, because tarot has become so popular today.
Yeah. It's wild, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Hard to believe. and so many of our decks use the Smith Waite deck as their text, and we're copying Pamela Coleman Smith's paintings. The woman died with barely the clothes on her back. She was alluded only once to being paid damn little for those paintings, and it's no one's fault, but I just wish too that we would do more to elevate living artists. Everybody loves the tarot, and she's dead a century. Everybody loves the Ramones, and they're all dead, a quarter century, and I just wish we could give a break to the H.P. Lovecraft who's living, rather than wait till 60 years after his death. And I know it's hard for people. It's hard for me because there's just so damn much that's out there to select from. But Anton LaVey used to say that your media intake should be augmentative of whatever you're already into. Don't spread your resources too thin. You'll start to sound like everyone else. So if you're interested in heavy metal, dig a deep hole and be into metal and know everything about it. And that's how you become you, not through sampling what all your neighbors are into. I guess Anton felt that well-roundedness was overrated and that you should be willing to go very, very deep into things. I suspect that's probably true. And it doesn't mean you can't do weird shit that's unexpected. I do things all the time, watch things or what have you that people might not think are on my palette, but I find something in it that's usually augmentative of what I'm already into. I never want to see people feel like they're behind the eight ball if they haven't listened to the hottest podcast or watched the hottest movie or, read whatever the fuck it is that dominates the summer bestseller lists. I think people have to just really radically go their own way, even if their friends think, oh my God, Jesus, all you listen to is, Tibetan throat singing. Yes, that is all I fucking, there's a greatness in that.
Exactly. And you don't have to be an expert on every topic. You don't even have to give an opinion on every topic. Everybody's an expert at immigration law or viruses or pyramids,
Right. It's like, I'm reading things in the paper and I find myself almost parroting like, well, if you hold a green card, you're protected by the Constitution. I don't fucking know that. How do I know that? It's like, I know it's said,
Yeah.
and on social media, my God, it's, forgive me, I'm bursting through open doors here, but it's so unnecessary to comment on shit you don't know. It's just so unnecessary. And I try to abide that. I really, what I know about is esoteric spirituality. That's all I fucking know about. And there's some of that stuff I don't know anything about. But for God's sake, keep your blood pressure down and don't comment on things unless you're just absolutely like dead to rights, very, very deeply versed in it.
Exactly. And as we get to the end, at least my last question is, and again, you deal with this in your book, Practical Magic. What do you say? Do you think, is it all mind or are there independent creatures out there or both?
I believe it's both. I absolutely believe that the psyche, it's a warranted belief that the psyche has extra physical dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
It's next to impossible that that's not correct. We've just seen too much data and testimony that validates that. There are entire fields of study from quantum mechanics to neuroplasticity that would have to be taken off the books if that estimation is wrong. But I do believe there are also non-human intelligences, higher energies, higher entities. Prayer is a very big part of my practice, and I have a chapter on spontaneous prayer in the book, and I feel certain that it's possible for the seeking individual to form some sort of an empathic bond with, call it what you will, an unseen intelligence or an unseen entity. And I say empathic because it was Dean Radin who pointed out to me that ethics arise from the emotions. And ethics, being the ability to judge, weigh, measure, evaluate, are fundamental to the intellect. I don't know that you would certainly have a flatter and more narrow intellect without ethics. And it seems to me that you'd be a calculator, and maybe you could be a damn good calculator, but maybe that wouldn't warrant the term intelligence. And ethics rising from the emotions says to me that these non-human intelligences have emotions, and I do believe that we can form bonds with them. And as I often say, the old gods may be lonely, and finding a deific figure from the pantheon or from outside the pantheon of history, east and west, it could be the most meaningful moment of your life.
Yeah. As long as you don't wake up Cthulhu, keep him in the ocean.
Somebody, has to, it seems to be. Maybe that's Graham. I don't know. Maybe Graham is Cthulhu.
He's the mad Arab.
Right.
So Graham, my costume last Halloween. So yeah,
Cthulhu costume. Yeah.
I do remember. I remember that. Graham, do you have any last questions as we land this plane? I couldn't think of another term.
I was going to sit there and say, I think the problem with recognizing the living heroes, the living H.P. Lovecrafts, is people like their heroes dead because dead heroes can't do things to let you down anymore.
So true, man. So true. Yeah.
I was going to say, my last question for you, Mitch, is what I find is AI does about as good as the average person in differentiating between opinion and truth. And that's a huge problem. Do you see any way that's going to get solved for AI? Okay.
That is a very, very serious problem, and all we'll wind up doing is then just creating another golem, which seems to be something we as a human species are really good at. And if you're right, and you may very, very well be, it's just a super, super powerful golem, and we're going to figure out, how, we're going to have to ask Rabbi Lowe, how to get the hell rid of it, and the next generation may have to face that. And I think you've made a good point that we like our heroes dead. Meeting one's heroes can be a terribly disappointing situation. I think probably everybody's had an instance where they've met a hero and they've come away very sad. But I came to something about heroes recently. I was watching a musical performance by a wonderful artist named Geneva Jacuzzi, and she was portraying the intersection between deity and celebrity. And it occurred to me that when a public figure or a celebrity commits a transgression, we will forgive that person, provided the transgression is within character. So Mercury is allowed to be a trickster. Eros is allowed to be lascivious. But when they commit a transgression that is not within character, that's when we won't forgive them. And it seems to me that's why some celebrities fuck something up, but they're able to continue, and other celebrities are not. But we do hold our heroes to a very, very tough standard, and I think you made a good point.
Well said indeed. Awesome. Well, we are at the end. For the audience, definitely get Mitch's book. I have it on the show notes. Anywhere you want to send people, Mitch, or any upcoming projects you want the audience to be aware of?
Well, in addition to Practical Magic, I have a historical podcast out right now called Extraordinary Evidence. ESP is real. You can find it on Apple
Ooh, I'm going
or
to subscribe. I
Spotify.
didn't know.
It's terrific. It's a 6-part limited historical podcast. It has music by Dean Hurley, who's the sound designer and composer who worked with David Lynch. And Dean's a wonderful artist. It's produced by Jim Perry and John McEdward. It's put out by Spectre Vision Radio. And the thing is free. And it marches you through the modern struggle to create and sustain parapsychology as an academic science. And so we'll go back to William James and the group around the British Society for Psychical Research up through some of the 20th century figures that we've been discussing, 21st century figures, Darrell Bem and the folks at Princeton who discovered a global consciousness, and of course the rise and fall of the skeptics. And I really am proud of that. So I'll mention that too as an adjunct piece.
Good deal, good deal. And this is you just narrating, or is there like a back and forward?
It's just me narrating with some historical footage and Dean's music and some beautiful production by Jim Perry and John McEdward. It's called Extraordinary Evidence. ESP is real. There's artwork, different artwork that accompanies each episode by a British artist named Jake in color. You'll dig the artwork. You'll dig the content. It's a lot of surprises, and it's hardcore history with show notes that include references and so forth, which I'm a stickler for, and I'm proud of it.
Good deal, good deal. That means you can take a break and go to the Irish woods for a while.
I wish. And look, you put the cat out. The cat's back. That's Schrodinger's cat. You did.
No, that's the other cat.
Oh.
Yes.
And I thought we were having a quantum moment there. But
no, yeah, exactly. Or the Matrix. It's a deja vu. It's deja vu.
I'm quite sure. And congrats on the occult Elvis. I see the cover in the background. There are such good things ahead for that book. You just feel the momentum behind it, and you're going to have a very big success this year.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's doing well. Pre-sales, it's already a bestseller in pre-sale. So
I have no doubt. And your cover is just right, and the book is great. So I'm very excited to see it go out in the world.
Best of all is so far, I have yet to have an Elvis fan mad at me because Mitch, Elvis fans don't play around. You make one I mean, they know Elvis. Speaking of gods and fundamentalist religions,
right?
Woo.
Right. They are hardcore.
They are so hardcore. Oh my God.
But I think you nailed it. I think they're going to be very smitten with your effort.
Yeah. They see what I'm doing, so they know I'm not. I've done the right thing for Elvis. I think that at the end of the day is, did you do the right thing for the king? That's what we wanted, right, Mitch?
No, I mean, you really did do the right thing for Elvis, and I know the love that is at the back of this book. I had tickets to see Elvis 5 days post-death at Nassau Coliseum on Long Island. I was 12 years old.
I know that story breaks my heart.
Oh. But it lets people know that the cast of characters supporting your book and behind your book, I mean, we're real Elvis fans. There's not a goddamn particle of irony in the bunch. We're the real deal.
It is. Yeah. Elvis is timeless.
I mean, where is it? Somewhere. We got TCB right here. I mean, come on.
Oh, love it. What a great.
Let's get serious.
That's it, man.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Well, first I'll say, Graham, thanks for keeping us company.
Oh, always a blast. And thank you, Mitch. It's been great.
Likewise. Thank you.
Yeah, Mitch, as always, it's great to have you here. Good luck with your book. And I am going to go subscribe to thy podcast and highly recommend you guys get Practical Magick. Thanks, everyone, for being here. And yeah, we will talk to you soon this weekend. And later this week, we'll have David Block talking about the Nephilim and the Watchers and Enoch. So it will be fun.
That is going to be cool.
You can't go wrong. Can't go wrong with Elvis or the Nephilim, can you?
Right.
It's
the old saying. Yeah. That's what Mom said.
Yeah. Stay away from those hips. The Nephilim hips and the Watcher hips.
Nephilim hips.
All right, everybody. Thanks for being here. And
Thanks.
yes, I say write your own gospel, live your own myth. We'll talk soon.